So we are all here. Why don't I'd like to convene? I think we're going to have fairly straightforward and maybe short meeting today. We had a couple scheduled presenters that weren't able to make it for this meeting, so they'll be happening at later meetings. But we decided it was still important to have this meeting because we didn't want to go 2 months without a sustainability committee meeting. We have some good things to report on. So we'll just, why don't we start with roll call?
Committee Member Cooper?
Here.
Committee Member Gollum?
Here.
Committee Member Sear?
Here.
Vice Chair Smithies?
Here.
Committee Member Urhammer?
Here.
Committee Member Way?
Here.
And Chair Peterson.
Here. Okay, so we had the minutes sent around, right?
I have a couple copies. Does anyone need a copy?
I wouldn't mind having one. I have to say I didn't spend a lot of time looking at it, but I think it was pretty straightforward. Anyone have any comments on the minutes from last meeting? I do not, because I'm not totally up on them.
Somebody want a hard copy?
Yeah. Anybody else?
I have more a question than a comment on the presentation on 5-1 from last meeting. Do you have that presentation, or was that?
Wes Sullen's presentation. Did I not send it out? I apologize. I will send it out. Yes, I have
Appreciate
it.
that, thanks.
I think it's up on my computer.
I don't have any comments on it. Anybody else does? So I move that we accept the minutes.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So the minutes are approved. So public comment, I see we don't have any members of the public here, so let's just move on. Announcements, upcoming sustainability events.
Yeah, so I'll list some sustainability events the city's, or some sustainability-related events that the city is putting on in the next couple months before your next meeting. You may have seen the banner outside. National Night Out is August 7th. It's always a Tuesday. And that is, I'm calling that sustainability-related because it's really focused on community resilience. It's put on by our police and fire departments, but everyone in the city participates. And if your block is not having a block party, maybe you have a friend nearby who has one. Highly recommended event to get around and to get to know your neighbors and talk about disaster preparedness.
And talk about sustainability.
And sustainability. Yes, it's true. I go every
DAC.
year and I answer questions about sustainability, whoever wants to talk about recycling and solar panels. But there's a couple Bike About Town events in the next couple months, several park cleanups as well. We have a coastal cleanup day in September, but we're still figuring that out because there's a beach project that's happening at the same time. So that's not a done deal yet, but typically we have a coastal cleanup event and we hope to have some sort of cleanup in honor of that, but it may not be in the same place it usually is. There's also a creek cleanup in mid-September. Albany Local Week is happening in mid-September, which is promotes people to buy local, which is also sustainable. And then I just found out today we will be partnering with the cities of Berkeley, El Cerrito, and Richmond again to do the National Drive Electric Week electric car show. It's going to be at the Berkeley Farmers Market, actually the same day that the coastal cleanup event would be.
What day is that again?
That's September 15th, a Saturday. It starts at 11 a.m. And we'll do, when it gets a little closer, we'll start doing some promotions for that on our website and other social media.
Yeah, and when's the stroll?
The stroll is not on my list, but that is the second Sunday in September.
It's the
The
9th,
9th.
so it isn't the same as that. Okay, that's good. And this is a year we have Albany Night Out, isn't it? Or Dinner with Albany.
Dinner with Albany as well is happening. I don't know what day that is.
Okay, anybody else have anything they want to mention? I know ACAC has some events coming up, that there are some educational events they're doing, but I don't know exactly when they are.
I don't have the exact dates, but do you happen to know? Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, if you go to the website, I think there's some, they're out a ways, but there's some educational things they're doing, both Eric and Jennifer?
Jessica, yeah.
Jessica.
Two events are upcoming,
least I get
but
the
I think
J
they're a
right.
little bit further out. They're probably
Yeah.
not in the next month, I don't
Yeah,
think.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's when our, let's see, we skip September, so we'll be meeting in October, so. Okay.
We skip August.
Oh, we skip August, okay, sorry. We meet in September, which will be here sooner than we know. Okay, any other comments on events? No? Okay, City Spark Fellowship. Was 5-2?
Yeah, so my fellowship is wrapping up for the year. My last day will be on August 9th, and a new fellow will begin their term on September 10th. Her name is Lizzie Carrad. She's a graduate of Claremont McKenna College. She has a bachelor's in government and a very strong interest in working in the public sector, specifically on climate-related issues. We imagine that she'll be playing a big role in the development of the CMAP, specifically performing a lot of public outreach and community engagement. She may also help encourage EV use once the city's new charging stations have been installed. And also she may help implement the hazard mitigation plan. So we're excited to have her.
And she'll start when?
September 10th.
September, oh, okay, wow.
I am going to graduate school. Humboldt State University.
Oh, this is my daughter goes.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, wow, good.
I'm excited.
What's your program going to be?
I'm going to be studying natural resources.
Great. Great place to do it.
I'm excited. I'm sad to leave here, but excited for the next chapter, so.
Yeah, thanks for all your good work here. It's been really wonderful having you.
Well, thank you guys.
Yes, and
It's been a pleasure working with you guys.
we are going to do a proclamation for you later, so
Yes.
that's good. Okay, great, well, thank you. Any other comments on that? 5-3, Climate Mitigation Adaptation Plan update.
I'm sorry, Nick, did we go over the announcements already? Or
Yeah.
Can I slip
sorry,
in not a,
Upcoming sustainability events, you mean?
yeah, I thought that there was like announcements, but
Well, we're in announcements.
we're in announcements, okay.
So we're in item 5.
Okay,
So we're in announcement item 5-3, which is Climate Mitigation Adaptation Plan update.
Okay, so on July 2nd, City Council approved our contract to work with Cascadia, Rincon, and BAE for the development of our new CMAP. We will have an initial staff meeting to review the project scope and timeline on August 1st, and we will be sure to keep the committee updated on meetings and other project-related events as we move forward with the planning process.
Okay. Do we have a schedule yet from them with what they'll be doing when, or that's still to be determined?
That's what's going to happen
Okay.
on that kickoff meeting. So we'll know more after that on August 1st.
I know in order to meet our budget, we have kind of a very lean, somewhat, especially interaction with this group. So I think it would be good if we could, I think we just leave this on here and have a report as we go along, and that'll be how we do it, yeah. Okay, any other comments on climate mitigation and adaptation plan? Only comment I have is there's, a lot of what the city is going to be working more on as a follow-up to CAP 1.0 and what we've pushed on that is pending doing all that research and work. And I think there's still some stuff we need to do, and we'll get into that when we get into our outreach committee and also the energy efficiency committee. So although a lot will be coming out of that, I think there's still a lot we can do now. Okay, and let's see.
Question on that.
Sure.
Have we, now that the contract's approved, are you able to circulate the scope of work for that contract?
Is it on? I can't see it. We're sharing microphones tonight. We'd be happy to share the scope of work. I think I caution you to read it before we have our kickoff meeting because I think we're kind of going to get into the details. So if you're okay with waiting, then I would rather share it after our kickoff meeting on, is it the 1st, August 1st?
The first.
But I can share their proposal with you now if you're interested.
Also, each one of the interviewees had a package that they presented, right? I mean, could that information be shared, at least the one from Cascadia?
Yeah, that's what I would share.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, oops. So I'm trying to take notes here as I go. So any other comments on that? I think that was it. So 5-4, update on electric vehicle charging stations.
Okay, so on July 2nd, council passed a resolution to adopt a rate and time limit policy for city-owned electric vehicle charging stations. And if you want the details, I'd be happy to provide those to you. And then on July 16th, council adopted an ordinance that defined electric vehicle charging language and established enforcement authority to ensure proper use of designated spaces. Council voted 5-0 to approve the ordinance, and it will go into effect in less than 30 days. And from there, EV charging stations are set to be installed this fall. So moving right along. So here at City Hall, and then the community center, and Public Works, I'm forgetting the 4th.
Ocean View Park.
How many
So
total?
all city-owned facilities.
How many total charging stations then?
5 total, 4 of them are for public use, and then 1 is for our city fleet.
Yeah.
Yes. Sure. So basically, so for those who have electric vehicles, you have to make sure that you're keeping them charged, or else they stop working. And so what we did is I did some research on the fees, I guess, like for here in the Bay Area, and then more broadly in California, the average fees and the range of fees. So basically, I worked with the Traffic and Safety Commission to kind of decide on fees as well as time limits that we think would work best for the city of Albany. So what they decided on was a fee of, if you want to know the details, a fee of $1.50 per hour for the first 3 hours of charging, and $5 per hour thereafter, or 30 minutes after the vehicle is fully charged. In general, our level 2 chargers, it takes about 4 hours for an electric vehicle to charge, so that's kind of where we came up with that $1.50 for the first 3 hours, and then spiking up the price from there. And then we have a maximum fee of $10 per hour for overnight, and what that does is that kind of helps to target people who either are renters or, they're living in condo complexes and they can't have their own electric vehicle chargers at their homes, because we don't want to charge them too much if they're charging overnight. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
that actually sounds really reasonable. So that covers the cost of the electricity that's being used?
Yes, we believe so. What we envision next year's Civic Spark Fellow doing is kind of 6 months or so after those chargers are installed and that policy is put into place, going back and reviewing the data, because we'll be able to see exactly who's using the chargers when, and if need be, we can change those user fees and time limits.
So do people have to, I know when I go to Whole Foods and I charge my car, they have EVgo stations there and you have to get an EVgo card in order to use them. Are these going to be operated by a third-party vendor?
Yeah, and the vendor is called ChargePoint.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure about the logistics. I don't think that you necessarily need a card. I know that I think that it's pretty user-friendly. Yeah, and it's either hooked up to your credit card, and you can,
Yeah.
find out exactly where those chargers are from your phone and how
Right.
long your car needs to be charged
I
for,
think they
et
have an
cetera.
app or something.
Yeah, there's a phone
An
app.
Yeah.
You know, what's interesting is every time I've taken my leaf to like Whole Foods and I'll plug it in for 30 minutes and I'll get a bill later to be well over $10. So you were saying $1.50 an hour?
For 3 hours, yes. For the first 3 hours.
$1.50 for the first 3 hours.
What's the power of the level 2? Is it about 6 kilowatts?
I think it's 6.6 kilowatts per hour.
That's pretty good.
So at $1.50 per hour, that's about 25 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm getting really ripped by EVgo, I
I
think.
think at Whole Foods, it's more like over $1
Yeah.
a kilowatt hour.
Yeah, it's pretty
Yeah.
high. Okay, any other comments on that? I think that's great. Are there plans for more charge stations at this point? This came out of last year's efforts, right?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah.
You know the answer. So we are interested in having more charging stations, but we're pausing to see. These aren't even in the ground yet, so we want to see what the usership is, what the need is for publicly owned charging stations. We have a parking challenge, and so designating locations for more chargers is going to be difficult. So we want to see what the need is first and where they are the most popular, and then go from there.
At the community center, it's going to be electric car vehicle parking only.
It's active charging only, so not even electric vehicle. It's
Living across the street and seeing what happens in that parking lot, that's going to be a big deal if you take away 4 parking spaces.
it's just one parking space,
You said there were 4 at the community center.
just one at community
Or
center.
public and one city.
But that's why we're starting with one to see how it goes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that could lead a whole discussion about fueling of EVs, but we'll save that for later. Any other comments on that? Okay, 5.5 East Bay Community Energy Updates.
I don't have much of an update. Where they rolled out to commercial and municipal and institutional accounts in June, and I have not heard anything. So that's good news, I think. I think that went really smoothly. We haven't received numbers yet on usage or opt-up rates or anything like that, but we have a meeting next week where we'll get an update from EBCE. So hopefully we'll know by then, and we'll have much.
Do we know how many commercial users there are in Albany, roughly? I mean, is it 1,000?
You don't know. Because it's different than how many businesses, it's how
Yeah,
many meters.
yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. That'd be interesting to know. And then, yeah, it would be interesting to see if people, especially those who opt out and say, I just want to stick with PG&E.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be good. Interesting.
So they did have some data before, but they couldn't share it with us because of the 15-15 rule. So the hope is that in the next month or so, they'll have data.
When you have this building with a single meter and you have multiple businesses, do all the businesses have to opt up, or can,
I think if it's just one meter, it's whoever manages the meter.
so that might be an issue.
So they are having a meeting tonight. They're talking about their local development business plan. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it, but it's very exciting. There will be a lot of good energy efficiency programs that come out of it beyond what's already happening in the county. So more to come on that after we hear what happens at tonight's meeting.
Maybe it'd be good, since Albany was like, I think, the only only city out of all of them in East Bay Community Energy that opted up.
Hayward and Piedmont as well.
But for both commercial and residential?
Hayward did both commercial and
Oh,
residential too.
okay, okay. Well, anyway, it might be nice if we could get kind of I mean, I know you are kind of tracking up, but maybe once every year or something, they give a more how things are going, what their plans are, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. We're supposed to get monthly updates from them. And certainly, there's not much to update while we're kind of in the waiting game. But we can get more information on that. And Tom Kelly, who will be speaking in September, has some information on, some estimates on how much savings we'll have based on our opt-up here. So
As in reduction of carbon?
carbon savings, yes.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions, comments on East Bay Community Energy? No? Okay. So, and we don't have any public comments, no public to comment. Okay, so let's move on to discussion of possible action matters. First one is proclamations. So we have a proclamation for Ron Gollum.
Ron, do you want to give I don't know if you've done an official announcement to the group. Do you want to make an announcement?
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, this is my last meeting as a committee member. I've been working in San Jose for the past 2.5 years and commuting, and I finally reached a point where I realized for my personal sustainability as well as broader sustainability, it's time to move down there.
That is a long time.
Sometimes I'm a stubborn person. So it's time to move on, and it's bittersweet because it's really been a pleasure working with you and the committee and just the work over the past several years. And in some ways, this is a difficult time because you're about to take on sort of the successor to the CAP, and so this is really a pivotal moment. So I'm sorry I'll be missing that, but I certainly wish you all the best. And I'm hopeful that you've got some folks lined up that'll be interested in taking the seat on the committee and contributing to its work. So,
Yeah, well, that's great. Thank you, Ron, very much. Really appreciated your involvement, your contributions.
Yeah, we're really glad to have had you on board. I have a resolution that I will read, and then you can pass, and I'll send it around for signatures. This is the Sustainability Committee Resolution 2018-01, resolution of appreciation for Ron Gollum for his service on the Sustainability Committee. Whereas Ron Gollum was appointed by council as the at-large committee member and began his service to the Sustainability Committee in November 2014. And whereas Ron served as vice chair for 2 years, beginning in January 2015. And whereas Ron was instrumental in planning the Albany Arts and Green Festival for many years to promote sustainability in the community. And whereas through his work experience in economics, planning, and transportation, he offered a high level of expertise to city planning initiatives, including preparation of the first update to the city's general plan in more than 20 years. And whereas Ron provided valuable input during discussions, including those regarding energy efficiency policy and financing initiatives, and whereas during his term of service, Ron was influential in achieving the city's sustainability goals, including help in the development of East Bay Community Energy and a target for net zero carbon. And whereas Ron is recognized by the committee for his commitment to making Albany a more environmentally responsible city, and now, therefore, be it resolved that the Sustainability Committee does express its appreciation to Ron Gollum for his service to the city of Albany and wishes him the best in his future endeavors.
Yay. Good job.
So
Okay,
someone
so
needs to make a motion, I think.
I make a
But
motion that we
you're
accept the
clapping marks here.
proclamation as coming from the Sustainability Committee.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I guess they all
I'll pass
opposed.
it down, and you can decide whether you want to use the same pen or not.
So that also brings, if we know of interested parties, when will announcement go out?
Well, Eileen has so I don't know. Do we have to wait?
Our administrative secretary is on vacation right now, so I'm not sure exactly when it will get posted, but if someone is interested, just give them our name, one of our names, and we'll make sure that the connection's made.
Yeah. It'll be posted in the next couple of weeks, and I can send that out when it's posted. I'm just not sure exactly.
And
when.
and then the city council, and it would be
It's
for
an
the
at-large position, yes. So we'll plan, hopefully, if the timing works, we'll plan to agendize it for the first meeting in September.
Okay.
And then could,
Is it a council appointment or a mayoral appointment?
it's an at-large council appointment.
So they all agree they have a unanimous,
Yeah, it's usually a consent calendar item
Oh, okay.
rather than a discussion, but yes.
okay. And if we know people that are interested, is it advisable that they send letters to the council now and say, hey, I have an interest, or what would be
There's an online application form that
which can be filled out at any time, isn't it?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and like I said, I'll send you those links when it's live on our website.
Yeah. Wise move. Okay.
Oh, and I guess
Oh.
we have to sign it.
We have to sign, yeah. Staff always goes last.
Okay. Well, thank you for getting that all together. So then, following on that, we have 6-2 proclamation and appreciation Civic Spark fellow Chelsea Pullivy. So,
Oh, yeah. All right. Okay. City of Albany Sustainability Committee Resolution 2018-02, resolution of appreciation of Chelsea Pulevy's term of service to the City of Albany. Whereas Chelsea Pullevy has dedicated her time to serve the city as a Civic Spark Climate Fellow, and whereas Chelsea came to the City of Albany with an infectious curiosity and enthusiasm, and whereas Chelsea jumped right in, helping draft the mitigation measures for the city's local hazard mitigation plan on a tight deadline, and has since demonstrated patience and grace in working with Cal OES on this plan, and whereas Chelsea eagerly offered to help the fire department and the city's community emergency response team, also known as CERT, administering a survey and organizing past participants. And whereas Chelsea was instrumental in helping the city pursue its electric vehicle charging goals, conducting extensive research and analyzing electric vehicle charging policies, crafting a recommendation, and taking this complicated subject matter and presenting it to decision makers in a way that was easy to understand. And whereas Chelsea drafted an ordinance to ensure proper use of new electric vehicle charging stations, and whereas Chelsea was influential in hiring consultants to write the city's climate mitigation and adaptation plan, researching potential funding, drafting a request for proposals, and participating in interviews. And whereas Chelsea drafted a survey and analyzed results for the city's Home Energy Score pilot program. And whereas Chelsea's work supported the citywide garage sale and the annual compost giveaway. And whereas Chelsea served the city well with her stellar communication skills, including her concise staff reports, beautiful PowerPoint slides, and articulate presentations to the city's Sustainability Committee, Traffic and Safety Commission, and City Council. And whereas Chelsea always remained positive, even when faced with an unexpected project or setback. And whereas Chelsea's dedication and expertise have assisted the city in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, making an impact on global climate change. And whereas Chelsea's remarkable commitment to environmental stewardship serves as a model to others. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Albany's Sustainability Committee wishes to express its sincere gratitude and appreciation for Chelsea's service term within the City of Albany to help foster a sustainable future, and wishes her the best in her future endeavors.
Yay.
I have a very short little acceptance speech. So thank you so much, Claire, and members of the committee. It's been a pleasure working with you all to help promote environmental sustainability within the city. Claire, you've been instrumental in making sure I get the full local government experience, and I can't thank you enough for all that you've done in taking me under your wing this year. We know that issues of sustainability are never completely solved, and it's been very inspiring to see how much time and effort you put into the decision-making process as a committee and within your subcommittees. I've learned so much from your thoughtful discussions on community choice aggregation, home energy assessments, outreach and engagement strategies, and other policies and programs that have been implemented or were considered for the City of Albany. Again, I very much appreciate your dedication to making the city a better place to live and work. I am excited to see what lies ahead for the city, especially as you begin working on the new climate mitigation and adaptation plan. And thank you for recognizing my achievements this year.
Oh, well, thank you. It's been great having you help us out here. Good. And that gets passed around for a signature too?
Yeah, you have to make a motion.
Oh, I need to make a motion, that's right. We don't get to sign it until I make a motion. So I make a motion that we accept the proclamation.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it passes. Now we can sign
You
it.
want to sign first?
Okay. Now, did I get that right? There's so then in August, when we don't meet, there's a gap, and then we get our Civic Spark Fellow.
Exactly, yeah.
Starts
So
up again,
by
okay.
the next meeting, Lizzie will be brand new. Chelsea came here her second day to a meeting, so. So, yeah, she'll be brand new, but we will encourage her to attend.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. Well, it's fantastic that they have that program. Is that going to be ongoing for a while, or?
We hope so. I don't,
okay.
it's unclear. We actually thought for a moment that we might not get one this year, or have to split one with another city like we did last year, but it ended up working out, so.
Where's the funding?
So we pay a small bit of it, but most of the funding for this position comes from East Bay Energy Watch, which is paid through PG&E rates, and it's a partnership with local governments, and our partnership is East Bay, so it's Alameda and Contra Costa counties, and we've really prioritized needing staff capacity for climate action initiatives, and so they've helped us fund this. That program may be shifting over time based on PG&E's plans, and so we don't have a lot of control ultimately about where that funding comes from or how much we get or how we spend it. But we will advocate strongly for the Civic Spark Fellowship.
Great. Okay, well, let's move on. 6-3, Energy Efficiency Subcommittee update. I know you guys have not met, but I thought what we would do is take the opportunity to talk about some of the things Mac's been looking into. And actually, I liked your recent recommendations that you put out through ACAC.
So Nick, can we just go back in the agenda just to the announcements? Because I just had
Sure.
one, not really announcement, but just update. So I spoke with the chair of the Parks and Rec Committee, and she mentioned Julia Chang, who is actually my sister-in-law, but she mentioned that there are requests to for tree removal from homeowners or property owners. And so she suggested that I bring this to our committee as an issue to consider. So the issue is that some trees may be recommended for removal by their owners, and it's not. Again, I don't really have all the details, but there's some process, but I'm not sure it's an ideal process. And so I think the potential concern was that some mature trees could be removed, and there's not necessarily a great reason to remove them. So that was the concern. And so it's also been brought to my attention that some cities have embarked on major tree planting campaigns. So trees, of course, as we know, can have multiple benefits in terms of providing shade, cool environments, providing beauty to streetscapes, providing some refuge for birds and nature, et cetera. And the list can go on. At the same time, to plant trees takes water and resources and maybe some fertilizers, and definitely trees can tear up sidewalks. So it's not just a open and shut case, but it's just something that I thought I could bring to the committee, and something for us to keep in mind potentially, because trees can also sequester carbon, but it just takes a while. So I just wanted to share that and bring that.
Yeah,
Not sure I understand. So
Yeah.
is the concern that there aren't any city regulations
I don't want to say anything which is, which may not be true. So I don't know, but there was a concern that there could be some persuasive homeowners, and I don't want to, criticize homeowners because they have, many different considerations, but that, there's just a concern that we could be at risk to lose some very established, mature trees in the community, and it would take a very long time to replace them. But beyond that, I can't say what the process is or how it's reviewed within the city or the Parks and Rec committee, but it was just a concern that was raised.
There is a permit process. I forget exactly how much it costs, but it does go through the Parks and Rec Commission. So, and I believe there's some form of public noticing. I'm not sure exactly what it is.
That's only regarding trees on city, like street trees.
Right.
If someone has a mature tree in their backyard, they can do anything they want with it, right?
With the exception of some areas around Albany Hill, you're correct.
Right. Was that at street trees?
was a street tree,
Yeah,
yes, yes.
okay.
Does the city still have a street tree planting program?
Yes, we have a city arborist who is responsible for maintaining the health of the trees that we have and working with people who want to plant a street tree.
I'm asking, I think this might have been like, honestly, close to 10 years ago, but at that time, because I broke the section of concrete, the city was nice enough to give me a tree that was planted, and it's now flourishing quite nicely. And the point was that it was, at that time, it's from an approved list of species because the arborist has thought about what are the appropriate street trees based on our climate and considerations around sidewalks and everything else, and I thought it was a great program, so.
Yeah, we had for many years a very dynamic and enthusiastic guy, Tony Wolcott, who's a wonderful guy. Tony retired. Our current arborist is John Hawkridge. John also is he's a little lower key, so he's not as much of a large personality as Tony was when he was with us. But he's carrying forward and updating that tree list for the species that are best for our sidewalks. There's always a tension between the health of the tree and the damage that some types of trees can do to sidewalks, and that's the rub.
Especially camphor,
Yeah.
which were planted everywhere in the, early 70s or?
I don't know when they're planted, but
I know that's not on the list.
we're now fixing a lot of those situations, and we're trying to save the trees that we can, but we don't want to put a lot of money. And as you now know, it's the city tax money. You as taxpayers, you're putting into a fund that we use to repair sidewalks. So we don't want to put tax money into a sidewalk to have some species of tree just tear it up again in a few years.
If it's any consolation, I know on my street on Peralta, there's still a lot of the camphors, and there's a homeowner down the block from me, and I had mine removed. I didn't want it removed. It was a beautiful tree, but it had been undermined, and Tony actually made the decision it had to come down. And they want to know how I got rid of my tree, because they want to get rid of the ones in front of their house, because the roots are actually getting under their foundations, and they can't get it done. The city won't let them. So I think if you want to remove a tree, you have to have a good reason. In fact, a while back, there was another gal who wanted all the camphor trees removed from around her. She said she was allergic to them. And, in Memorial Park, and that was denied. She was actually a smoker too, which I thought was interesting. But that was denied, and they sold their house and left the area. So I think the trees are fairly well protected in that sense, at least the street trees. But that's an interesting thing, and I think also just in line of things we can do to reduce carbon, if there was a more aggressive and managed street planting plan, a lot of our mature trees are reaching age. And in the next 20 years, I think you're going to see a lot of them going away unless we have some kind of plan for replacing them. We're going to be down a lot of trees. So I think that's something that may come into the CMAP program or recommendations. We didn't see much of that in CAP 1.0. Trees take a while to grow until they can be of a size that, but there are certain species that are more good at carbon sequestration. So.
Yeah, and I would just add you'll probably all know this, but it's not just about sequestering carbon. It's that trees provide shading for buildings and shelter, so they affect energy use in buildings. They encourage active transport because it's much nicer biking or walking along trees or waiting for the bus when you have the shelter of a tree. So all of that can be considered even just with the climate.
Right, and it lowers when, you know, you get too much heat absorption, heat radiating out, so it's been proven in other areas. I think that's a good point. So we should probably reach out more to our city arborist and talk about a tree plan.
So
Or-
going back to the thing that you raised, Max, so is the concern about the street trees or backyard trees?
I think this concern was for a street tree. Yeah.
Okay, so it didn't sound like it's easy to remove one.
Well, I guess I'm not familiar with, I mean, yeah, I wasn't completely clear on that process, but I'm glad to hear that there is some, you know, due diligence that's done.
Yeah, every time I've kind of say, I mean, you can put in the requests, like people do put in requests, they want a tree removed, gets evaluated, and then it's the arborist's call, isn't it?
No, it's the Parks and Rec Commission.
Oh, Parks and Rec Commission.
The arborist makes a recommendation about whether it's healthy or not, and whether it's an appropriate species and that kind
see.
of thing, but it's ultimately a commission decision.
Oh, okay.
So that is, I mean, knowing that Parks and Rec is covering it, is there any role for us on this issue?
I'd like to better understand what Julia felt like there was a gap in the process and fix that, definitely. I wouldn't think of the sustainability, I wouldn't want to have two commissions looking at something like that. That would really stretch out things for the people who are trying to get a decision out of us. But, you know, maybe it'd be good for the committee to review the removal policy, that would be fine, or
Data.
the data, that would be really
The data
interesting.
about requests and the number of trees actually removed.
Yeah.
Those sound like good follow-ups. The other thought that I had was whether, you know, there's something that our staff could obtain in the form of information on other cities' tree planting programs. So San Francisco, I think, was planning to plant either 2,000 or 20,000, I forget, but, you know, a large number of trees in terms of strategies or funding streams or, you know, learnings. I don't have a quantification really for how much, you know, at least from the carbon, looking through the narrow carbon lens of how much is sequestered. So that's, you know, one piece of the puzzle, but I definitely agree with Stephanie that there's a lot of benefits clearly. And it's a long-term investment. It's not
I
like
think since this isn't on the agenda, I feel like we're sort of getting
Well,
into an agenda
yeah.
item here, and I think it's
Yeah,
a good
well,
time
I
to
think what
pause
it
and we
is-
can agendize it.
Yeah, Max mentioned this was something that came back out of announcements, but I don't know. Let's kind of keep it under sort of energy. Well, it's part of a sustainable concern. But what I was hoping to do is get more of an update on, you know, ways we can, and maybe we should just move on to our subcommittee, outreach subcommittee update, because I think that'll touch on it
I think
more.
Max does have information on the energy subcommittee update.
Okay.
I do. So sorry about that detour. Didn't mean to sidetrack the meeting.
Trees are important.
But I did send something to you, Claire. Did you receive that? Okay. Can you
So I have
share?
two things.
Okay.
I have the Word document and the PowerPoint. Do you know which you would like first?
Sure. Maybe just the PowerPoint.
Sure.
So I did share with Claire, and I sent out to some members of the committee a blog post for 10 simple things you can do to reduce your carbon footprint.
Yeah, that's great.
So that's actually been posted on the Albany Carbon Action Coalition site. So, yeah,
That's great.
I
Very good.
don't know if we want to go over that, but maybe Claire, would it be possible to send that out to folks? Or?
Yeah, I
Okay,
can forward
all
it.
right, okay, great.
Yeah, and one thing, we had talked about this before, and one of my interests was having a way to get this kind of information out to city at large, citizens at large. And the idea of having a portal, and with Chelsea pulling our sustainable information more together, we had talked about maybe doing links that would allow something like this information to be readily available to people. And then at one point, we thought of linking in the ACAC group, but we could put them on, maybe under the listing of community groups. But there's a little bit of a question about whether we can have a direct link to one of their items as a city link.
This sounds like an outreach committee
No,
update, so
the-
I think we should
Yeah.
stay on the energy efficiency committee update.
Okay.
Okay, so just wanted to share that, I guess not formally in this meeting, but just maybe if people are interested, they can take a read of it and send me any inputs. Okay, but I did want to just talk about, as a follow-on to our earlier discussions on energy efficiency on the water heating topic and natural gas consumption. So I put together some slides, although I didn't meet with our subcommittee, so I didn't have a chance to meet with Stephanie. But again, I just wanted to keep the discussion moving. And I'll say that this presentation is a little bit more technical than normal, so I apologize if you find it hard to follow, but let's give it a shot. So some of the key points that I'd like to make are that residential water heating is about half of the natural gas energy consumption in the residential sector, and therefore about half of the greenhouse gas emissions. That's on a statewide average basis. So whether Albany is 49% or 43%, I don't know exactly, but it's a big number. And so installing a heat pump water heater, which is fuel switching, essentially to move away from natural gas to electricity with high efficiency electric heat pump, can sharply reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But it has two large obstacles, which I wanted to highlight. One, it can have higher installed cost, and two, it can also have higher operating costs, assuming average PG&E utility rates. So this is a big problem because unlike solar PV and electric vehicles, which also have higher, first costs, but you realize operating cost savings, it's not necessarily true for heat pump water heaters. But I would say that even though it's more expensive to install, and how much more is kind of not completely precise. I'm just taking a swag at it. Call it 1,000. It could be 500. It could be 3,000. I mean, it really depends on the type of installation and the situation. This is all for retrofits. It's not for new houses. So even though it can be nominally more expensive, there are near-term ways to bring the annual energy costs to parity with natural gas. So specifically with time of use rates, or if you have a rooftop solar system, and I'll discuss that. And so just thinking about this 1,000 or maybe more, 1,000 to 2,000 more cost, a new sewer lateral is also, I don't know what it is, but I'm just assuming it's in the order of a few $1,000s. Okay, and that's required for point of sale. So next slide is just, would it be possible to dim the lights just a little bit? Just so we can see a little bit better. Thanks, Jeff. So this is just a pie chart for the state, just showing the breakdown of residential natural gas consumption. And so water heating is about 1/2 of the pie. And that's because water heating you need it 365 days a year, but you don't need space heating 365 days a year. It's only like 2 or 3 months a year in our mild climate. And the other end uses are much smaller fraction, like cooking and drying and pools. Okay, so next slide. Also, it's important to note that with continued global warming, water heating will make up a larger relative share of carbon emissions because space heating demand will go down. And that's seen on the right-hand plot for overall residential heating took a nosedive in 2014 and 2015, and that's because those were the two hottest years on record. So the lower right curve is showing the residential space heating demand dropped by about 25% in those 2 years. But water heating is not so affected by the climate because you're taking water from basically the ground and then trying to heat it up. So it's just saying that it will have a larger relative share over time with continued warming of the climate. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so it's getting a little bit geeky here, but you might wonder, what is a heat pump and why are we talking about heat pumps all the time? So this is a simple schematic diagram. And I would say, firstly, that the heat pump concept is nothing new. It applies to your air, the physical principle is what drives your air conditioner, as well as your refrigerator. And the basic idea is that you're using a heat exchanger effect, which is using a refrigerant gas, and you are basically trying to pump heat from a warm climate and transfer that heat, in this case from warm air, through a heat exchanger to some other medium. So this can mean that you're pumping heat from warm air and trying to transfer that to water, which is in the heat exchanger, or you could be just trying to transfer that warm air to heat your home. And basically, you're expelling cool air on the other side. So the left-hand side of the plot is really how your refrigerator would work, in that your refrigerator is pumping warm air out of your interior refrigerator and providing cool air into the refrigerator. So the coefficient of performance here is greater than unity. So a coefficient of performance of 3 means that for 1 unit of electrical energy produces 3 units of heat energy. So heat pumps are about 3 to 4 times more efficient than gas heaters.
How does that compare against a tankless hot water heater versus a tanked one?
It's about 3 to 4 times more efficient. Yeah, it's more efficient. Yeah. So a couple of things to note here is that a heat pump water heater expels cold air. So that's shown on the left-hand plot. It produces noise, as in a refrigerator. So if you have it in your house, it'll produce some noise, but it's pretty manageable. And it also has a slower response time in heating up water compared to a gas-based heater, because you're not burning something to provide instant heat. It's kind of this heat exchange process, which is a lot slower. So those are some key points to keep in mind.
Question about that. So does the heat pump, does it have a tank where it keeps water?
Yes, it has a tank which keeps water. So it typically has a storage tank, which would be on the right, which is a large tank. It's typically like above 50 gallons.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for example, when you turn on your shower, the tank would supply warm water on demand.
Right. But if you run out of hot water, like if you have your family over for the holidays and you run out of hot water, then it cannot produce enough hot water using the heat exchange, the heat pump principle, and it would have to kick in a backup heater, which is typically electrical resistance heating, which is much less efficient than heat pump heating. Okay.
Max, do they make combined home heating and using the heat exchange to do home heating and cooling?
I think that they do. They probably do, yeah. I mean, there's no reason you couldn't do that, but I think that they're not that commonly deployed, and I believe that they're pretty expensive. But it's something we could, explore in the future.
And are there other types of electric-powered water heaters than heat pump?
Well, the most common electric-powered water heater is just a resistance heater, which is just passing like a current. It's just you're heating up through a resistive heating element. So there's no enhancement in efficiency. So the efficiency of an electric resistance heater is typically about 1, but for a heat pump, it's between 2 and 4.
So it's the
So you
same,
get a large enhancement.
it's the same as gas?
It's a little bit more efficient than gas. So the gas efficiency is like 70% to 90%, and electric resistance heater is about 99% to 100%. And on a percentage basis, these heat pumps would be like 200 to 300% efficient. And you're not violating the principle of conservation of energy, but you're just trying to pump heat. You're trying to transfer heat from warm air and trying to move that to another medium.
What I was trying to
Yeah.
get to, is there a less expensive alternative, which is just the resistant heat?
Yes, resistance electric heaters are much less expensive. They're very cheap, but you're going to use three to four times more electricity.
Yeah, I think the operation of those becomes very
So
expensive.
it becomes prohibitively expensive,
So that's why gas, everyone prefers gas, is it's cheaper
right?
to inefficiently heat than
Right,
using
right.
electricity.
Right.
What kind of power consumption do these heat pump water heaters have? They require like 220 at 30 amps or something like that? Not less?
It can depend on how much hot water you're using.
Yeah.
So if you're using a lot of hot water, you probably do need a 220 amp circuit. But if you are not, if you're just a single person or just a couple, for example, you could get away with just a 120 volt, and you wouldn't have to upgrade your circuit.
That's what I was wondering. You might have to, if you're got a modern house, you may have to actually increase the capacity of your main panel if you start putting in a lot of circuits like this. Because
Right.
you got to, say, a dryer and stoves and so forth, you may need another heavy-duty circuit
Right.
for a heat pump hot water heater.
Right, right. Yeah, I'll have some more comments on that. So next slide, please. Okay, so to decarbonize water heating, again, this is a little bit out of order, I'm realizing, but I just put down some key technology approaches. So the first one is what we're talking about with electricity. So you can couple low carbon or zero carbon electricity with electrified water heating. The second way is solar water heating, but that's very expensive to install. That's like, upwards of $5,000 to install.
You mean like an active solar water heating system?
Yeah, yeah.
Solar thermal.
Solar thermal, essentially.
Solar thermal,
Right,
yeah.
right. So on your rooftop and then
Right.
pumping the water around, yeah.
I know the state of Hawaii's had a longstanding requirement for that for new construction.
It's all over the world.
A lot of countries do, and it's very low, generally
For
low
some reason,
tech,
it's
but
incredibly high cost here, and it has been for
Because
30
you
years.
Go anywhere, in developing world to, Europe, you see solar thermal on all kinds of houses.
Yeah, you would think that California would be ideal for solar thermal, but. And then there's also renewable natural gas. So you can think of that as a low carbon fuel substitute for conventional natural gas, which is extracted from underground. And the source of that could be coming from methane from, say, dairies, or it could be captured from manure. You can also capture natural gas from landfills. But this is a lot more expensive than conventional natural gas, and it's potentially a limited supply.
You would need some kind of storage tank, right?
And you'd need to kind of develop some market for that, which doesn't quite exist. And then, of course, there's always conservation, which is not a technology, but it can apply equally to any technology you're using. If you can use less hot water, it'll cost less. Okay, next slide, please. So I don't want to go over this. So actually, I wrote a paper with a colleague on this very topic, and these plots are drawn from the paper, which I don't want to go over because they're very much of an eye chart. But if you just look at the bullets, this is highlighting on the right that solar thermal is very expensive. So I'm quoting a cost of over $8,000, believe it or not, to install. And that's based on real data. And this reference is quoting instantaneous natural gas, which are tankless water heaters at about 2,300. And depending on the type of heat pump you get, you can get kind of your basic heat pump or a very advanced heat pump. It can be from 2,400 to 5,000 ballpark to install that. Okay, so there's a wide range. As Robert mentioned, heat pump water heater may need a new dedicated circuit, which could be incur extra cost. And it might also incur an electrical panel box upgrade depending on how much current you're drawing into your house. However, that's mitigated because so many other end uses are becoming efficient, like LED lighting is so efficient and your refrigerator is getting more and more efficient. So that may not be a huge issue, but again, it's kind of a case-by-case basis. So I'm just quoting kind of this average of 100 and 2,700. I'm just taking about a nominal $1,000 more expense here for the heat pump to install relative to a tankless gas water heater. Okay, and there's some more cost data I'll show you in a minute. Okay, next slide. This slide, I'm just trying to show that you can reduce the emissions significantly from using a heat pump water heater. So the first two bars are gas water heaters emissions, and the turquoise and the blue bar are heat pump water heaters. So you can see that nominally is 50% to say 75% carbon emissions reductions today in 2016. Now, if you had a zero carbon electricity supply, which we would normally have with the new CCA, that would in principle reduce the heat pump, the turquoise and the blue bars even further. It wouldn't reduce it necessarily to zero, and that's because of the area which is in asterisks, which is kind of shaded there with the dots, and that represents the refrigerant leakage. So the refrigerant can also leak and be a direct, very potent greenhouse gas itself. So that's what that represents. And the reason the blue doesn't have any refrigerant leakage is because that represents a heat pump with a CO2 refrigerant, believe it or not, which doesn't have any global warming. I mean, it's just much lower, so it's practically zero. Okay, so next slide. It's just to show that there are big reductions here possible. Okay, next slide. Okay, so again, I'd like to focus on the first set of bars, and this is showing an annualized cost representation currently for heat pump water heaters versus natural gas water heaters. And again, the first two bars on the left are natural gas, and the turquoise, the fourth bar, and the blue, the fifth bar, are heat pump water heaters. And you can see on an annualized basis that this cost, including installation costs and annual energy costs, is higher for heat pump water heaters. It's, whatever that is, 33% to maybe 40% higher. However, you can see that a lot of that is driven by the shaded portions of the bars. So the turquoise shaded is a lot bigger than the orange shaded, and that's the electricity or the natural gas cost. So that's the annual energy cost. Okay? So the annual energy cost is indeed higher for heat pump water heaters in this case. But this assumes an average cost of PG&E electricity, which is about 17 cents per kilowatt hour. Okay, and natural gas, the key point here is natural gas is just very cheap, so it's very difficult to compete with. It's about 1/4 of the cost on an energy basis versus electricity. Okay. However, if electricity costs were significantly lower, it's like about 30% or 40% cheaper, then the energy cost for the heat pump water heating and natural gas can be comparable. Okay, so you can really bring down those shaded costs in the turquoise and the blue bar. So you can really achieve parity or even better. And this could be achieved by either time of use rates, where you can get really cheap electricity at night, and it's about 11 cents per kilowatt hour, not $11, sorry, or from rooftop solar. So rooftop solar today is not at 10 cents per kilowatt hour, but the DOE target, the Sunshot target for 2020 is 10 cents per kilowatt hour. That's in 2 years normally. And we know that the cost of rooftop solar has been falling rather dramatically over the last 5 years. So this is just saying that if you leave aside the higher installed cost for the moment, the energy cost can be competitive with natural gas, assuming you can exploit either a time of use rate or rooftop solar PV. Okay? And this also assumes that the heat pump is controllable. In other words, you can kind of program it to run when, at nighttime or when there's cheap electricity, which you can do today, but it's just a question of, is it going to meet your servicing demands? So, you might run low on hot water, and then it would kick into the backup, and then it would be running on electric resistance, and you wouldn't be getting as energy efficient performance. So those are some considerations. Does that make sense? It's kind of a lot of information, but that's the main message I wanted to convey. Okay, so next slide. So there was one recent retrofit installation in Albany that I took a field trip to. This was Nick Pilch's.
It looks, I saw that one too.
Yeah,
Looks
so
very
this is
familiar.
kind of a high-end, maybe, hybrid. Hybrid just means that it has an electric resistance backup. So that's all that means, 65-gallon. It's about $1,700 online, and the coefficient of performance is 3.5. So again, this is about 4 times higher nominally than natural gas, the highest natural gas efficiency. And the install cost is shown there about $5,500, which is a lot. But it's kind of a boutique-y high-end installation in that Nick included new venting. So the venting, which is to say the intake air, which is the source of the heat, the vent on the top of the system goes up to his attic. And so it's drawing hot air from his attic. So it's a great kind of setup, because there's more heat in hot air. But it also added extra cost. And the outflow of the air, once you've absorbed the heat from the air, then what you're expelling on the right side, lower right, is cold air. So you don't necessarily want to expel cold air in the winter into your house. So he also vented that upward back into the attic. So that's the fancy venting. Okay. So it also included a new circuit, which is 220 volt. But I'm estimating that the base equipment and install was maybe half of that cost, maybe $2,400, $2,300. And once you add the new circuit, that's maybe another $600. So that's about $3,000. So if you didn't do all the new venting, then it might be a lot less than this, maybe up to half of that cost. Okay. So, and PG&E also has had rebates for this in the past. I'm not sure exactly how much it is today. Maybe it's 500, maybe it's less. Okay, so that could reduce the install cost in this case. Okay. So next slide. So that's pretty much it that I wanted to share. So what could we do to encourage adoption? And this is just brainstorming thoughts. So there's the information dissemination, and Nick was suggesting maybe there could be some volunteering to help people look at their home, see, hey, could this make sense for you? Or do you have room? Is there a nice closet space somewhere under your house potentially? And how could we make this process easier? I think one thing to note here is that contractors are not necessarily familiar with this technology. So Nick was not able to get a lot of quotes. So there's, if there are, say, 10 contractors in the area, maybe only one is familiar with installing this or does it on a regular basis. How can we provide greater incentives for this, given that this is such a large source of carbon pollution? So back 2 years ago, one of the uses of the revenue from a utility users tax was to provide additional rebates for heat pump water heaters. So that's a potential mechanism if we revive the UUT in the future. The other thing I alluded to earlier, which is that at the point of sale, it's really a great opportunity to try to intercept upgrades in the home, be it installation or new appliances. So would it be possible to have, a requirement to require some minimum standard, efficiency or low carbon water heater at the point of sale? And again, this would be an additional expense, but it's not unprecedented in that we have things like the sewer lateral in place already. So I think that's all I have. Yeah, but any questions?
Could this be sent around to all the members? the slide
Sure,
set?
yeah,
That was
yeah,
the-
yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can
one-
send that out.
One comment I have is this really shows, I mean, this is like the low-hanging fruit of fuel switching, is everyone, I mean, most of the water heating in Albany is done by gas, and I would say most of them have the tank, some have gone to the tankless, but they're still burning a lot of gas. And, you know, Nick is kind of on the cutting edge, Nick Pilchin, he did this, he put, you know, his money sort of where his mouth is to do it. But this really shows the hurdle. I mean, this is one of the, this is sort of low-hanging fruit in the method moving on, as Robert was saying, well, you'll have to up your service. Yeah, that's a good point. You know, when I did my second floor edition, I put in 200 amp service because I knew I was switching everything to electric range. I took as much gas out as I possibly could. And that was a big cost to put in the 200 amp service, which, you know, I'm not using all of it. But as you change the fuel, you know, your source of your fuel needs to be evaluated. And everybody's on these old 100 amp systems. There's a cost. So it, you know, thinking this through as far as if you're serious about, as a whole community, doing a fuel switch, we really, it's like doing the sewer lateral. You know, if we're, as a community, we're not going to pollute our groundwater anymore and contaminate it. We have to somehow at some point capture it, and maybe you do need to require upgrades of electrical service, at least putting in an outlet near a water heater that can be a 220 or something like that. I mean, otherwise, no one's going to do it. But again, you're only capturing, I mean, if you only do it at point of sale, then you're only capturing it when it's at the point of sale. So I think this kind of underscores one of the big hurdles of the fuel switching, and I don't know how I mean, it's a head scratcher. I mean,
Is East Bay Clean Energy considering any kind of a program for fuel switching along these lines?
Yeah, they have a pilot program, at least in their local development business plan, to try to work with a small amount of homes on fuel switching. I don't have a lot of details yet, but certainly we'll get you involved when we know more.
Yeah, on that note, I was just reading through, they have a draft of their ideas for fuel switching policies in general. That's like 50 pages long that I was looking through. On that note, I was wondering if it would be possible when we have subcommittee things on the agenda to have a little bit more specific so that we can still prepare a little bit. Just because like I'm really interested and I wish I could have had the time to read through this before getting to this. I was wondering if that might be possible to add to our agendas.
Yeah, just more specifics on the
Yeah.
on the subcommittee. I think we didn't know what we were doing until after we'd posted the agenda. In this case, it was a sort of a unique situation where we had two presenters who dropped out, and so we kind of scrambled. But yes, absolutely, if there's something like this, we should be more explicit on the agenda.
Thank you.
So, Max, I'm still trying to understand, and I am not knowledgeable on this, so this is all very impressionistic on my part, but heat pumps for heating and cooling has been around for a long time. That's a well-established technology. And now we're talking about heat pumps for water heating. So I was kind of surprised when you were talking earlier that somehow there's not seems to be a viable option for combining the two, because if you were to do that, you know, switching both, going back to your graphic, you're talking about 75% plus of natural gas usage.
I think the thing to keep in mind is that heat pumps, you know, just for heating your home have been around for, you know, a generation or more. But typically they're bidirectional, which means that they can heat your home, but they can also cool your home. So they provide heating in the winter and cooling in the summer. So in those cases where you have a lot of cooling demand, which we don't have, they can be already economic. Maybe in
So
the
it's
Midwest.
cooling demand,
So here, you know, we, you know, would have less cooling demand. So if you
For
were to get
now.
an air source
Yeah, exactly.
heat
Until
pump,
things warm up.
then it would be kind of expensive and you wouldn't really be getting the benefit of efficient heating. So, but to your question for
So
water
just to finish that
heating,
thought, so let's say I
Yeah.
lived in Livermore, for example,
Yeah.
that combination might be more attractive.
it might be more attractive in Sacramento, yeah,
San Jose.
yeah.
Yeah, it was 82 when I left San Jose this afternoon.
It's 105
Yeah.
in Yuba City today.
Yeah, but in terms of your question of combo water heater and space heater, I guess I'll have to say that I'm not completely knowledgeable on what exists. But I think one reason for that is because it's normally been for heating your home and cooling your home. So, it's not to say you couldn't do all three, but, yeah. And I'd say that for the costs here, I think my sense is that some of these costs for heat pumps are inflated, partly because there are so few being installed. So there isn't a lot of competition. The volume overall, we might be making millions of gas water heaters, but only, thousands of, it's just totally different in scale and volume.
It's a newer technology.
So I
Which
think
kind of
there's.
gets to, this discussion is about the retrofit industry, but, it's not, the nature of Albany and what we do is not going to fit in. But at a state level, there's a lot of new housing production in the state. So if the state were to do something, the state could take a big role in stimulating the industry on the new construction side.
Correct. And so the state is very interested in zero net energy homes, but more recently, more of a focus on zero carbon homes. And you can't get to zero carbon with natural gas in your home. So it implies something like an all-electric home with heat pump. A lot of insulation for new construction. But yes, that's absolutely spot on. Correct.
Right, and I can add to that, in other countries, it's much more common to use heat pumps, so even like a lot of the mini split heat pumps used here are made in Japan, for instance. And air source heat pumps can do all three, space heating and cooling plus water heating.
Just for your information, Max, I had a quote at my house, and it was about $3,000 more than a gas water heater. It was around $4,000. And I didn't have clearance in my garage anyway. So, but I got a contractor who had done a bunch of them. So it'd be, that without some subsidy, we need some other technology because it's, or lower cost, because I don't know that people are going to spend that much more just because it's the right thing to do. That's a big leap. Plus it costs more to operate.
Yeah. My kind of hope is that what you're saying, the parity, if you bring in solar and solar eventually starts saving you enough money, then that that sort of is the key to making it's more a whole system. You can't just do one little component. You can't just take out gas here and plug something. It has to be of a larger kind of component in an overall what is putting all the components of your home together. So again, this is I don't think just do this, we can put the whole thing to rest, say, oh, this is not going to work. This is kind of the future, and the way to put it together. Yeah, there's going to have to be a bunch of incentives. It's going to have to be, East Bay Community Energy, more sustainably developed solar, et cetera, but it's tough to get away from this. That's the whole addiction on fossil fuels. They're cheap. They're readily available. We've got a whole world set up to pipe them all over the place, and it's killing the world. So I don't know. We need to think of methodologies, and that's a big thing to take on.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, the first point about thinking about the system or a system, and also the falling costs of PV, because it's true that as you install more PV, there's more of a solar peak, and then at least at certain times of the year, you're getting an overabundance, an excess of
That's a storage
electricity.
issue, yeah.
And so, how can that be part of this overall picture? So that was something I was thinking of doing maybe next, is just looking at the economics of this with PV or with, different PV cost assumptions. Because I think really, if we are serious about getting to zero carbon, it's really potentially, this is the path of going to zero carbon electricity and then electrifying everything, including your transportation and your heating appliances. And so to do that, you know, you'd probably go with the lowest cost electricity, which is solar, but then you need some storage. But how does that whole picture, how does that whole package look together? Because then you are getting savings from some of the other things like your electric car. So there's kind of, there's some savings and then some things will cost more. So it just speaks to your point about looking at a wider system than just a single appliance level. So I agree with you.
Right, well, and just basing it purely on a cost-benefit analysis, you'll never win, you know, I mean, if, you know, the cheaper fossil fuels are just hard to compete against. And I think the reason it's coming down is they're coming out with better electrical.
Right, I just add, because I'm thinking, well, how do we turn around this information into something that this committee could act on, or
Right.
the city could act on? But, right, the points being individually, one by one, at this moment and these fuel prices is more expensive. But if you look at a group effort, like a neighborhood effort, or more systemic, where you're also integrating switches in your other technologies, like a pilot neighborhood to, you know, go all electric, like then you can start shifting things and creating markets, and you can do a pilot as a showcase where maybe there's some incentives. But it's not a question of, let's do a traditional cost-benefit analysis. Oh, it doesn't look good, so forget it. It's like, right, how do we overcome the hurdles and climb the mountain and get over to the other side? So my only thought is, could we have a pilot, like, how would it look, a pilot neighborhood? Have any other cities done this? Like, that's something we could at least look into.
Do they all have to be in the same, I mean, to try to find a place where everybody next door to one another is going to want to do the same thing or even be able to afford to do it? But maybe could it be just a community, citywide community effort, but maybe it's more scattered site?
Like a group buy,
Yeah,
so you-
Group install.
like the same thing they did with the electric cars, where you go out to
Like
bid.
sun shares.
Yeah,
yeah.
do that for,
Yeah, there are two potential pilots happening. There's the East Bay Energy Watch pilot, heat pump water heater pilot. So we'll probably, Chelsea, do you know when we hear about that? Not sure. Probably in the next few months. So we're curious about what we hear from that, and then also curious about what East Bay Community Energy is doing. But yes, I think that this is super interesting, and these conversations should be definitely part of the CAP 2.0 planning process too, as solutions to some of these fuel switching challenges.
A final question on this. It seems like this discussion's been implicitly around single-family homes. We have a pretty reasonable segment of our stock that is multifamily. And when you look at new development, I have to assume that pretty much the limited amount of new development we have, most of it is going to be multifamily. Does this work as well in a multifamily environment?
So I am not aware of a central heat pump which can then pipe hot water to individual units in a multifamily. So, I mean, you could envision units having their own appliance, but I think that's, that's a question, an open question. Is it a lot more economical to have a, more centralized unit versus individual discrete units? But my understanding is you don't have a distributed product yet, so.
But they do make, and again, I've seen it more in Japan and Asia or in Europe. Yeah, they're making these for commercial facilities, for hotels and hospitals. So I don't know what the costing would look like here for multifamily, but in terms of the technology, and it must be somewhat economical somewhere that they're doing it.
or they're required to do it. So
Well, I think they generally tax energy a lot more in Japan and other countries too.
And gas is more expensive elsewhere.
Yeah, the other point I'd make is just that, we often assume the same level of service, like the same hot water, the same clothes washing, the same dishwashing, the same showering. And so, I think there's a role to question some of those assumptions, like do we need the hot water on every cycle for our laundry or dishes? So, because if we could somehow reduce our hot water consumption, then you wouldn't need to necessarily get an 80-gallon tank, which is a huge appliance. That's like maybe double what you have today. Maybe you could get a 50-gallon, and that would reduce the cost by a third. So I think, again, it's more of a system picture, but I don't think it's a good assumption to assume, well, anyways, that's my personal view, that I think there's a role for conservation, which we don't talk about as much, and we probably should.
Okay. Well, that was fascinating.
I have a couple last
Sure.
comments before we continue. I was wondering if Albany requires a permit for new and replacement water heaters.
Yes.
Would it be possible to consider speeding up that process as an incentive for electric water pump heaters?
For a standard replacement of a water heater, it's an over-the-counter permit, so it's not really, you could waive the cost, but it's like $130, $140 or something.
And I have to wonder what percentage of folks even pull a permit to replace a water heater.
Exactly, we don't chase after every plumber in town, so. Most of the legitimate plumbers know to do that, but not all of them.
The other thing I was thinking about is if we could publicize existing incentive programs. So PG&E already has a rebate program, and as far as I'm aware, a lot of EBCE customers and CCCA customers are still eligible for the PG&E rebates, and they can still be used, and if we can publicize that further. The other thing is thinking of financing as an incentive possibility, and there's already existing programs. So there's PACE financing, Property Assessed Clean Energy, and so thinking of that as a way to combat the initial barrier, the initial cost barrier that happens for these water pump heaters.
That's not a very good
Not a good system.
straight.
Well, yeah, it's a couple points up higher than what you get if you did refinanced your home or something. But again, if you're worried about large cash outflow and you don't think you'll be living there for an extended period of time, it just puts it, it's less of a burden. So, I mean, I don't think we're going to find something that does everything and puts you ahead cost-wise, everything. So that, I guess what I see as an issue is we need to look at how to incentivize this, or at least get the information out so people know what they're up against. And then it seems like there's this bigger issue of if fuel switching is what we need to shift towards, how do we encourage that and how do we promote it and how do we require it? I mean, is that something we need to investigate? And I appreciate what Max has brought up because it shows it's more complex and there's a lot of moving parts and it's a changing environment too. So anyway, thank you for presenting that. Does anybody else have any more comments? I mean, I don't know if there's anything.
Thank you, Max.
One other thing, on hot water heating, is there a good breakdown or estimate of how much, what takes the most hot water? Is it showers or clothes washing or dishwashers or what? How do they rank?
Yeah, I don't happen to have that break. That's a great question. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, for water use in general, I think a lot of it is outdoor watering for your plants.
I'm thinking
But for
just
hot water, yeah, I understand. But for hot water, I mean, my guess would be, showers and clothes washing and dishwashing. But I don't know the relative breakdown.
Well,
Yeah.
I know like we have, the modern dishwashers take like 4 gallons of water maximum per dishwashing cycle, and that's the full tilt cycle. Less efficient or more efficient cycle, less time, takes less water than that. So they're almost negligible, I think, compared to, say, clothes washing or taking showers.
Right,
Yeah.
I mean, my one is hooked up to the, I think it's hooked up to the coal water. Something like that.
Your dishwasher.
I think so.
well, a lot of different aspects to it. And I'm sure it's different depending on household and age of house and all sorts of other things. So it's interesting thing. My suggestion would be we continue to encourage you people knowledgeable in this to bring more information forward. And I think we need to start looking at, what's the best information we can get out in pathways. So I think that leads into our next subject, which is the outreach subcommittee update, which I'm on and Tom's on and Samantha's on. So we met, I guess it was less than a week ago. Was it a week ago? Exactly a week ago. And went over just some general brainstorming topics that we've gone over before, and came up with, ended up discussing the idea of having or trying to promote workshops that would be, well, this was sort of my idea, but the initial thing would be to have some sort of general presentation, probably at the community center, that would be focused on pumping out as much information as possible, and then that would lead into workshops that would promote rooftop solar, those that have already done rooftop solar, looking at storage, battery storage, adding that to your system, and other things that would promote more sustainability. So that was one idea. And then I think the other thing that we want to clarify and kind of get more behind us is this idea of, should we still be looking at putting on, or not, the Sustainability Committee cannot put on any events, but do we want to encourage members to use their energies to do some sort of annual large sustainability event? And, like before, we used to do the Arts and Green Festival, but at this point, that's and you can clarify this for me, Claire, if you want. That's under the large events done by the city are done by Parks and Recs now. So if we want to partner with them, we can. So the path forward on that would be to lobby them, or a subcommittee group could do that, or someone could put together a group, or we could ask ACAC to do it. So I think that was about all we discussed. Is there anything I'm overlooking?
So you said which ones, workshops, and then
Yeah, just this large, that we're sort of stymied on this large festival thing.
We talked about a variety of approaches, different kinds of workshops targeted to different audience. So
Right.
something to the high school that could be connected to like a career day kind of thing. If you're thinking about college and a career and sustainability, you get, people to come and talk about those kinds of things. There could be something targeted to people that are interested in specific technologies, solar, battery storage, or, something like, doing something people are interested in learning about hot water heat pumps, those kind of things. So that was the idea, is to offer a range of things. And then we talked about the Arts and Green Festival as the, something that pulls in people that aren't interested, don't have any concept of why is this important. You have some kind of an event that brings in those kinds of people and exposes them to different, sustainable lifestyle choices or businesses or whatever. That was.
Yeah. So again, I think when we were discussing this, and I think there was one other thing, did you want to talk about this idea of a tour?
So another idea was similar to how there's the open art studios that we have, having an open house tour kind of sustainable houses, and even neighborhoods with large gardens, and that idea, and having that be kind of a casual event where people can wander around the neighborhood for a day or a weekend, going to different houses and looking at them as an example and maybe a role model.
Right, and that would allow people to share what they've done at their own level. I mean, maybe some people are more advanced than others, but at least seeing what other people are doing towards trying to make their lifestyle more sustainable. So promoting some sort of sustainable home tour. So again, with outreach, these are all ideas that we're kicking around. The next would be implementing them, which always seems to be, of course, as the committee, we wouldn't implement them ourselves, but we push them off to another organization. Right now, it looks like ACAC.
Well,
to
before you
promote
go
those.
there, Nick, we were supposed to have a report from staff for this meeting about what's the process to do an event, if we wanted to do a big event like the Arts and Green Festival. You were going to explain that to us. There's a new, memories, last meeting that you said there was a new policy, so you were going to share the policy with us and what the process is and how we would go about, or how the community would go about initiating an event like that with Park and Rec.
I think I don't recall exactly what I said, but the direction that I've gotten from the last two city managers is it needs to be something the Parks and Rec Department does.
Right, no, that wasn't the question. The question was, how does something get initiated like that? How does Park and Rec get directed by an advisory body or the city council? Or suppose we think it's a good idea to put on a citywide event. How does that get communicated to Park and Rec as a, it could be the Sustainability Committee and the Arts Committee pass a resolution that said there should be a biannual event or whatever, that kind of thing. Or somebody from the community thinks we should do this or that. How does that, what's the process?
My understanding is most of those ideas come from the staff of the Park and Recreation Department. I don't go to a lot of Parks and Rec Commission meetings. I've gone to maybe 3 or 4 in the last few years, so I don't know if they routinely have brainstorming sessions about that, but that might be a place to start if you wanted to we can.
Park and Rec would recommend that the Park and Rec Department do an event?
I want to clarify that committees don't recommend that staff, don't
Right,
tell staff what to do, so it
So
would,
that would go to council, so the committees would send a resolution to council saying we want to do something, or we think that.
Again, it's usually, I don't know, to be honest with you. It's the director of the Parks and Recreation Department is really the person you need to talk to about how to do this. I don't know of any other events that have started through anything other than discussions with the director. I can't think of a situation where the city council has decided, or any committee has decided that this is something they want to do, and go to the city council, and the city council directs staff to do it. I might be wrong because it's not our area of responsibility, but I think most of those events come from the creative people over there in that department. So we just need to figure out a way to get a dialogue with Shelley. That's the bottom line.
So as,
Flip secret messages under their door, make a diorama, their parking spot.
so just so I'm kind of mindful there's a history here, and there was this event that was somewhat put on by this group. Now we're saying, okay, this committees don't put on events, only Parks and Recs puts on events. That's a city policy now, or it's a city mandate from the city manager. The new city manager is in agreement. So basically, as an entity, if this entity, the Sustainability Committee said, gee, we'd really like to see a yearly event put on, can we reach out to Park and Rec through some decision, like, can we make a decision here saying, please let Park and Rec know we would like to see a sustainable, and we have subcommittees and associated community groups that would participate in that. We can have them meet with them or something. I mean, is that a good process to do that? Or as a committee ourselves, we're not to communicate with Parks and Recs?
Well, I don't think you should do that tonight because, if you take an action to make a specific recommendation, I don't think that's particularly on your agenda. But if you wanted to do that, we're not going to stop you from doing that. I don't know if it will be effective, but you're welcome to give it a try. We'll do everything we can to take it to the city manager and to the Parks and Recreation Director, and we'll see what happens.
So we could put on our agenda that we would make that we have a request. Would it be a request then, or would it be a,
That's what we were looking for. That was what we thought we were going to get from you at this meeting was what is the process? And you mentioned there was a policy and you were going to.
I don't know
Is there
again,
a
this
real-
is,
is
there
there a
isn't
real
there really
policy?
isn't it's talking, we're not.
internal politics or something like that?
It's not internal politics. It's their response. It's that department's responsibility. We've taken this message forward a number of times.
Yeah,
I don't think it's useful to do it the same way again, but if the committee wants to do that, I'm not going to try to talk you out of taking an action you want to take.
well, I think so we're kind of asking for advice on, I've heard, so the way it's been explained to me is we don't put on event, the Sustainability Committee doesn't put on events anymore. So we're not doing that. If we want, as a concept of outreach, having a large citywide event, which would have to be put on by Parks and Recs, how can we recommend to them that they do that officially? We just make a statement, please do that. Now, they could totally ignore it and not do it, or whatever they want to do, but is that the process of doing it? I mean, would we make a proclamation, or we just say, no, forget it, we can direct one of our members to go talk to them, and they can be the person that pursues that, or, I mean, I want to get it off ever coming up at our committee meeting again,
And can I ask a clarifying question here so this is a discussion about kind of use of city resources in terms of staff time or other items. So if it's staff time and other items, that's the decision of the Park and Recs Director. But if we're talking about other precedents where the city has just made a financial contribution, like a grant to a private organization putting on a privately organized and run event?
Right, so I think the city writes a $5,000 check to the Solano Stroll every year, as an example. And that has a different set of complexities. There still has to be a nexus that we figure out. And I'm not sure there's a really strong nexus with the Solano Stroll, frankly, but anyhow.
History.
Yeah, but that's more in our control here, in terms of allocating a budget to do an event that somebody else is doing. But I don't have any ability to tell the Parks and Recreation Director to go do a project, to go do an event. And we've said this over and over again until we turn blue.
So the models are the Park and Rec Director in his or her discretion can decide what they want to do within their budget and resources. There's the Solano Stroll grant model.
Right.
And otherwise, there are no other precedents or models for how this has been done currently.
I believe that's true. Again, there may be exceptions to that I'm not familiar with because we don't stay closely connected to them. But I think it's basically between the director of the department and the city manager have discussions about this.
So it's not, so there's not something where the council would say, we want an event, and they would direct staff to do that? It's just a question of the city manager deciding or the director of Park and Rec deciding that's something that they want to do?
I think the creative ideas come from the staff. For example, there was a new event this year, Play Like a Girl.
Awesome.
A month or two ago. And I think that was a department initiative that they ran with. So I think it's figuring out a way to inspire them to collaborate with them to figure out how to do something that they feel that will be a successful event.
Yeah. So I know we've had this discussion before. It's come up a lot, and I appreciate past members' long history of being involved with this event. What I'm going to suggest is if we want to, it sounds like something that now moves to a subcommittee or a community group that then can try to push and promote that. And then they can lobby Parks and Recs if they want to get the city involved, or they can just try putting it on themselves. Is that, and both of those are possible paths.
I mean, there are certainly organizations that reserve city facilities to have events. So, yeah, you could, again, that goes to the Parks and Recreation Department. But that could be a way you approach it.
Yeah, okay. Well, does anybody have any thoughts on this?
Just to clarify, we're still able to use digital means or flyers and posters without oversight from Parks and Rec.
Sorry, can you clarify that?
Yeah, so we can still publicize through like an e-blast, for example. Those are still options. It's just the idea of hosting an event really isn't feasible.
It depends on what you're promoting. Are you promoting an event or?
Something else. So for example, like this is passed now basically, but the EBCE victory or along those lines, or the upcoming CMAP process.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. Ultimately, it's sort of up to the city to decide what is in line with city goals. But if it's something that, we want to get out to the community about a decision that council's made about EBCE, obviously that's something that we could do. Sort of depend. It's kind of on a case by case, I guess. It depends on what the message is, I guess. Not being very explicit.
But basically, it's up to staff to send out a communication about their activities.
Right.
Right. And the challenge for us on this is that if we did it for everybody, we might end up finding ourselves being forced to promote something that isn't in alignment with city council values. And so that gets us into a delicate area with what we put on our webpage. We can't let some organizations say one thing and not let other organizations say the opposite thing. So we can promote our own events or events that we're affiliated with, but we don't necessarily promote other very wonderful things, but maybe not something that we're directly related.
Maybe another way to ask Samantha's question is, if something is related to promotion of the CAP, that we wanted to disseminate not something about the actual CAP process, but something about decarbonization or some kind of information that we think we want to communicate to people, residents of Albany. Can we create something, give it to staff, and staff disseminate it?
I'd be happy to work with you directly on messaging. For instance, the 10 tips for energy efficiency. If we wanted to create messaging that we promote through the city, I'd be happy to do that. I guess the clarification is it ultimately has to come from staff. But if the information can be generated by the subcommittee to help staff create something that's relevant to the CAP, we'd be happy to do that.
And we want to, I feel like we're being part of the problem rather than part of the solution. We really do want to try to promote as many events as we can. We just have to be a little bit more defensive about the possibility that somebody who disagrees with the nature of the event we have to respect their ability, their constitutional rights to express themselves on this into the city's communication venue as well. And so that's why we're kind of protective of it, because we don't want to turn it into just a next door forum type of thing where it just gets way out of control. And we're pretty close to that sometimes, I think.
But if it's in support of something that council has endorsed,
If it's
Like the
clearly related
cap.
to CAP goals
Yeah.
and in line with Sustainability Committee's goals.
And we'd be as creative as we can to be able to support that as much as we can. And if there's a problem, we'll tell you about it and we'll work through it with you.
So maybe another way of going about it is, like, if we were to offer you some content or information relevant that you felt, oh, this would be good to share related to your tasks at hand, we can just offer that to you.
Yes, we welcome it with the caveat that it's ultimately up to staff's discretion, but we definitely welcome the information.
So just to shift maybe, or maybe this is somewhat related, but on the topic of outreach and social, electronic communication, I wonder if it would be possible to or to have the Albany newsletter as a venue for communication or tips. I mean, my idea would be a presence on the newsletter, which would be in keeping with the CAP goals and objectives. Hey, here's the tip for this month, or did you get your rebate in the mail today? Did you know that you got a rebate in the mail today? Or, PV costs have dropped by 80% in the last 3 years. Just a presence and a communication, because that's something which goes out every month and it has a base, and so it's just something, if that would be possible, would be a great regular medium to communicate directly with the community. And it's not like a page, but like a paragraph or a just like maybe it's a link or something. Yeah.
Yes, I think we would be open to that. The best way to do it would be to send us a lot of information all at once, and then we can talk about it with the people who post the e-news, so that they have something to pull from regularly. Sending stuff every week it might get lost in the shuffle a little bit.
So the city has the e-news, which is kind of everything. Has the city ever considered having kind of topical specific newsletters? So like in addition to e-news, there might be like a sustainability and CAP newsletter?
We've talked about that. We would not do it regularly. We just don't have the capacity. But we did once do a special edition transportation e-news about all of our transportation initiatives that were going on in the city. So absolutely, we could do a kind of special edition sustainability e-news.
So,
Maybe it works really well when EBCE is coming out and have kind of like
Yeah.
a spotlight on that.
again, this idea of having on the city webpage, a link that you can get all this climate action, based on the climate action plan, what you can do, like the 10 suggestions that Max came up with. I mean, I guess what we're struggling with is how, as the Sustainability Committee, can we communicate out or reach out and get this information via the city to citizens? Like the idea of having the portal or having a big event or doing that. We can't do that ourselves, but we need to request with staff that, is there a way to do that? So,
Well, you can, through a partnership with ACAC, have a different venue than going through the city. But like I said, I'm happy to work with you on messaging for
Okay.
e-news and the website.
well, and I wanted to capture this thing that Chelsea's doing, if she's pulling together kind of the sustainability items, that might lead to a little bit more presence of them I've always been a little, discouraged that you can't go right to the page and go, what do I do for helping? What has the city done? What is the status of the climate action plan? How successful are we? All that information, it'd be nice if it was more accessible there through that portal. So I'll reach out to you and talk about messaging. Do it that way. So I don't have, I mean, again, these outreach things, we tend to think of stuff, what can we do? Which immediately means you're doing something or initiating something or printing out and publicizing something or putting something on a webpage or asking people to come to an event. And it sounds like most of those concepts need to be then pushed to ACAC to actually implement. We don't really implement them as this group. Right?
But would there be anything to keep the outreach subcommittee from directly contacting Parks and Rec staff or the director to have a discussion about event ideas?
No, I think we'd be happy to try to facilitate that.
Okay. Yeah, maybe that's the way to do it. So as a subcommittee, we could, if you're sort of telling us, well, you need to work it through the director of Park and Recs, well, the subcommittee can go ask to meet with the director of Park and Recs and say, hey, we really think you should put on a annual event that's focused on this, and we have these ideas about workshops and things like that.
Uh, What they do with that, I don't know, but yes.
Well, they can just say, go fly a kite, but I mean, at least we tried, right?
Yeah.
So that would be a way to do it, to initiate. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe the outreach subcommittee could approach this as getting Parks and Rec excited about why this could be something that residents would really be interested in. What are kind of creative, fun ways to really do something?
Yeah, and we can actually see if people through ACAC are interested in doing that too. Yeah, okay. Okay, any other thoughts on this? I think we kicked it around.
Can I suggest that
quite-
we agendize this one more time
Oh, really?
before you go to the director? And maybe have a little bit more of a focused discussion about what you would present to her.
Oh,
I
I
just think,
think-
I don't know that if you walk out of here right now and call her tomorrow, I'm not sure you're going to be successful.
What do you mean?
I'm not understanding what kind of event you want to have. And more precisely, to be able to help advocate for you. Because you're going to go there and I'm going to try to talk to the
No,
city manager.
that sounds reasonable. So what you'd like is for the outreach committee to put together,
No, well, I think it's the whole committee needs, I just feel like we need to have one final discussion and do it in your September meeting and get it over with. And this be the last shot at it.
okay, well.
You don't have an action item tonight to do this.
The action item was just the presentation from the outreach committee, because the outreach committee is the one that's been sort of delegated with looking into how can we reach out and engage the community in sustainability, and this concept of having an annual sustainability-based event that falls under the aegis of the city has been reoccurring naturally. So what I was going to suggest was that the subcommittee put together what more structure on what the event would be, so that we understood what kind of event, and then come back and agendize item to talk about what would be negotiated or put forward to Parks and Recs as what we're trying to endorse. Does that sound right?
Yes, but I think that should be further discussed at a
Right,
committee
right,
meeting.
right. I'm just
And
saying, if we
now
put
and
it all
then-
off to when we sit around in this is a really awkward venue for
Right.
figuring this stuff out. It doesn't seem to work very well. So what I was thinking of saying is, Tom, Samantha and I can sit down and put more structure to what this event would look like and what are the goals of the event.
Would you be kind enough to invite me to your meeting?
Sure,
I'd like to be there.
would love to have you.
You mean the subcommittee meeting?
Yes. I feel like that, you're right, that'd probably be a better venue to have the discussion.
Yeah,
than here.
because then we can throw all sorts of, and be more.
And we can talk through all the different issues.
Yeah.
I think that would be a better
I'd
setup.
love
And
that,
then
Jeff.
report back to the full committee.
Great.
And then make the pitch,
Okay,
and then be done with it.
sounds like, there's your process. Okay, thank you, Jeff, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay?
Just one quick thing. I don't mean to have staff repeat themselves over and over again, but I do feel like what was presented to us in the outreach options previously when we had, I know Chelsea created it with like 3 different tables and the idea of all of these different channels. It feels like there's been some shift in that. And I think just a clarification in what the actual process is and what the Sustainability Committee's actual capacity is for outreach, because it is part of our work plan, but it also does feel very limited, and I also don't want us to spend time pursuing something that's never going to happen realistically.
No, that's a good point. So maybe we can get an update. That's what you're talking about? It's up on the...
Yeah, that's what we talked about previously, but I mean, the city website portal is one of those, but it doesn't really seem like that's a strong option. And then the Ease News, doesn't feel the same way, or targeted workshops for residential contractors definitely doesn't feel like something that we're talking about is feasible right now. So I think that like as the outreach subcommittee, we've been looking at things that aren't going to happen.
I apologize if I made you feel that way. I'm kind of confused as to why you feel that way. These appear are recommendations from city staff on what you should focus on.
So those
specifically.
are options.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I was just saying staff has discretion in terms of, ultimate discretion in terms of what materials go on the website. And Jeff's comments related to what we can and can't put on our website and which events we can and can't promote has to do with promoting specific groups. For instance, like a community group.
I see, okay.
But if you're talking about promoting CAP goals, then those are the kinds of things that we should be working on together.
Oh, okay,
And
okay.
that's what these venues are for. But they're not for promoting community groups, they're for promoting things that are directly related to the city council goals.
Okay, I misunderstood. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So we'll have a outreach subcommittee meeting. We'll invite Jeff, and usually happens at my place. I'll add you to I don't know, do we have the next one already?
We do not
Schedule.
have a scheduled meeting.
Oh,
currently.
okay, I need to schedule that. August is a real mess, so I'll fit it in there. Okay, thank you, everyone, for struggling through that. Subcommittee, this is actually turning into a longer meeting than I thought. 6-5, discussion of subcommittee structure. Can we move on to that? Was there a specific?
It was kind of a carryover from the last meeting's discussion, and perhaps you want to table it given the time, but we added it here because you had a light agenda, but you didn't have a light agenda.
Yeah, well, I think the idea was we were going to revisit the subcommittees and decide, are these active, are they not, is this still going on?
And it was really in the context of CAP 2.0, so maybe it's something you want to wait to talk about in September, but it was in the context of how do you want to break up subcommittees, because the next year is really going to be focusing on CAP 2.0, and it may be really, really helpful to have subcommittees focused on different elements of the CAP that they can research or vet policy or some of that stuff. And maybe that needs to wait until we have an update from the consultants themselves and recommendation from them. But last month you had talked about, you already have an energy efficiency subcommittee. You had talked about maybe having a transportation one. There was some discussion back and forth.
Yeah. And I think we've heaped a lot on the energy efficiency subcommittee. It's kind of turned back into sort of a CAP/CMAP subcommittee, looking at fuel shifting and everything related to recommendations that are going to be coming out of that. I mean, again, I think my thought on that was, let's keep some momentum going. Let's just not stop and sit and wait for results to come out of the CMAP consultants' work, that we know there's certain things and they can be vetted, and hopefully some ideas will formulate on whether we want to make policy recommendations or not. So, I mean, again, I think the energy efficiency one sort of grew out of, we were going to do this BETO recommendation, and that's kind of fallen away as we realized maybe that doesn't get us the bang for the buck that we thought it would get. So I think I'm agreeing with you. Maybe we table this, look at it later. But for right now, if everybody who's on a subcommittee can keep focusing on that.
wanted to comment, if I may, that it does seem like from the energy efficiency subcommittee, there are, I mean, these known large barriers for heat pump, for electrification, we just went over that. A lot of barriers, and for energy efficiency, there are a lot of barriers. So we haven't focused as much on transportation, but I think that there are arguments to be made for focusing more on that. So I do think that, you know, within either the efficiency subcommittee or within outreach subcommittee, we should focus more on transportation. Because, I don't know what you guys thought, but it does seem like the heat pump electrification is gonna be a long slog, a long, hard slog. For all the reasons you mentioned. But, you know, the EVs and the plugins, I think those are here, and so. And we're building 4 charging stations, which is great. So just, that would be my input.
Yeah. So just to get back, the discussion on the subcommittee structure, so we have this existing structure, and we call yours the energy efficiency one, and we're in this outreach one. One thing I was concerned about, that we not be spinning wheels. So maybe the thing to do is take it to a little higher level and think about, are there approaches to these big hurdles that we see that we wanted, that will lead into recommendations to city council for some sort of policy? Or is it all just a matter of getting information out so people are as informed as possible? You know, it seems like those are two things.
I'd like to suggest that because we're past time now, that we put that on the agenda for our next meeting, that we bring or even share our ideas in advance if we have any specific recommendation about how to restructure them, and put those ideas out ahead of time rather than trying to brainstorm
Yeah, no, I think
endlessly
that's a
while
good
we're
idea.
here.
Yeah, okay. All right, so future agenda items, we're going to have the presentations, right, at some point. Do we have hard dates for those yet, or no?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty concerned about the September meeting is going to be too heavy to carry over some of these items because we have 2 presentations. I can try to get North Lennox to come in October because.
I think that's a good idea. Yeah.
But he seemed adamant that he wanted to come in September, but he also has a flight that night, so I said maybe we should give you October, so I can let him know that
Yeah,
that's when
let's just tell
we're
him that.
available. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Any other ones you want to bring up there?
Well, we talked previously about plastics. And as you know, a number of cities are eliminating different kinds of plastics, from straws to bags to all kinds of different things. So staff looked at that. That would be good to get a report about what staff is doing, what other cities are doing, that kind of thing.
Can we leave that as I think we've got a lot going on. What if we leave that as a future thing, and then we'll request that later? We'll put it on the agenda later.
Could we maybe combine that with waste reduction and talking about zero waste policies?
Oh, that's a big part of it.
Yeah, I mean, anyway. I'll talk to you about that when we do our prep meeting. We'll figure it out. Okay. No more public, so no public comment. And next meeting is September 19. Okay, everyone have a good August.
Yeah, happy holidays.